A scream tore through the Colorado Canyon in 1879, piercing the heart of Hannah, a grieving widow hiding from her past in the rugged mountains. Once a healer, now a recluse, she faced a choice that could unravel her solitude or her life. The cry belonged to Tahu, a Comanche chief, his pride unbroken despite a steel trap's cruel bite. What unfolds is a tale of courage and forbidden bonds, where one act of compassion sparks a destiny that could unite warring worlds. Will their hearts bridge the divide, or will blood-soaked vengeance claim them? Subscribe now, share where you're tuning in from, and uncover the secrets this canyon holds. Stay to the end for a twist that redefines the frontier. The autumn wind howled through Devil's Canyon in 1879, sharp as a knife's edge, carrying the scent of pine and the threat of an early frost across Colorado's high desert. Hannah Morrison, 28, stood at the warped windowsill of her lonesome cabin, her calloused hands gripping the splintered wood. Her auburn hair, tangled by mountain gales, framed a face etched with grief. Grief for a husband lost to a Cheyenne raid 3 years back near Fort Collins. She'd fled west to this forsaken ridge to escape memories and men alike, seeking solitude in a land that chewed up the weak and spat out their bones. The mountains, red as rust and jagged as broken promises, kept her secrets. A scream shattered the morning's quiet, raw and human, clawing its way up the canyon walls. It wasn't the yowl of a cougar or the bleat of a spooked deer. It was a man's cry, desperate and fading, like a candle guttering in a storm. Hannah's blood turned to ice. Her mare, Copper, snorted, ears twitching, sensing trouble on the wind. Another cry, weaker now, echoed from the depths of the canyon, a place settlers swore was cursed, where strange lights flickered on moonless nights and travelers vanished without a trace. Hannah had scoffed at such tales, but now each fading wail pulled at her like a hook. She moved fast, instincts honed by years of frontier survival. From a shelf, she grabbed her father's old leather satchel, a relic from his St. Louis medical practice. Inside, laudanum for pain, bandages torn from worn petticoats, a bone saw she prayed would stay unused, and a silver flask of whiskey, antiseptic and courage in one. She checked each item with the precision of a gunslinger loading a revolver. Copper pawed the ground as Hannah saddled her, the mare's nostrils flaring, catching a scent that set her nerves jangling. The cry came again, faint as a whisper, and Hannah knew hesitation could mean a man's death. She rode hard into Devil's Canyon, the trail a treacherous ribbon of loose shale and twisted scrub. The red rock walls loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows swallowing the sunlight. Every hoofbeat kicked up dust that stung her eyes, but she pressed on, following the sound deeper into the maze. The canyon's reputation gnawed at her, tales of lost souls and vengeful spirits. But the cry was real, not some ghost story spun by firelight. 20 minutes of grueling riding brought her to a narrow ledge above a steep ravine. Below, something stirred in the brush, half hidden by scrub oak and mountain mahogany. Hannah dismounted, her boots crunching on gravel, and crept to the edge. Her heart thundered like a stampede. 50 feet below, a man knelt beside a boulder, his leg caught in the cruel jaws of a bear trap. Its steel teeth, forged for grizzlies, bit deep into flesh and bone, blood pooling dark and thick on the red earth. He was Comanche, no doubt. Long black hair braided with eagle feathers, bronzed skin scarred with warrior marks, buckskin leggings, and a beaded vest proclaiming his rank. His breathing rasped, ragged and shallow. His face, pale as death, crept closer. Every instinct screamed at her to run. The Comanche were the frontier's terror, shadow warriors who struck and vanished, leaving blood and fear in their wake. Her Thomas had died at the hands of their Cheyenne allies, and she'd sworn never to trust those who rode with war paint. Yet, as she watched the warrior struggle, his pride unbroken despite the trap's merciless grip, she saw not an enemy, but a man facing a death no creature deserved. His dark eyes met hers, not with hatred, but with a weary curiosity, as if wondering why fate had sent a white woman to witness his end. Hannah's hands shook as she tied copper to a scrub pine and began her descent. The ravine was a death trap of loose rock and sheer drops, testing every ounce of her frontier grit. She used her rope, rappelling ledge to ledge, boots slipping on shale that crumbled like dry bread. Twice she nearly fell, saved only by a desperate grip and the stubborn will that had kept her alive in these mountains. The warrior's groans grew louder, each one a knife twist in her gut. She didn't know his name, but she knew his kind of courage, the kind that stared death down without blinking. When she reached the ravine floor, the sight stopped her cold. The trap was a monstrous thing, 10 inches wide, its serrated jaws buried in the warrior's ankle. Blood seeped steadily, flies buzzing in the cool air. He watched her approach, his gaze sharp despite the pain, a low Comanche chant on his lips, melodic and defiant. Hannah knelt beside him, keeping her distance from his powerful frame, and studied the trap. Its spring-loaded mechanism was a blacksmith's nightmare, designed to crush bone with relentless force. Opening it would take more than strength. It would take a miracle. And time was running out, the warrior's life bleeding into the dirt with every passing second. The warrior's blood-slicked ankle glistened in the canyon's half-light, the bare trap's jaws a grim testament to the frontier's cruelty. Hannah Morrison, kneeling in the dirt, felt the weight of her choice settle like a storm cloud over Devil's Canyon. She could still turn back, leave this Comanche to his fate, and keep her solitude intact. But his eyes, sharp as flint, holding neither plea nor surrender, stirred memories of her Thomas, bleeding out under a Cheyenne blade. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Her hands, steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat, rummaged through her father's satchel. The laudanum bottle glinted, its bitter promise of relief her first ally. She held it up, miming a drinking motion to the warrior, whose name she didn't yet know. He nodded, a flicker of trust passing between them, as if he sensed she wasn't just some settler's widow meddling in his death. Hannah tipped the bottle to his lips, the opium's sharp tang cutting through the coppery stench of blood. His throat worked, swallowing pain and pride together, and within minutes his rigid frame eased, the lines of agony softening on his weathered face. The trap loomed before her, its steel teeth sunk deep, a blacksmith's curse forged for beasts, not men. Hannah studied its spring-loaded mechanism, slick with blood and rust, knowing one wrong move could snap it shut again, on her hands or his leg. She wiped sweat from her brow, the mountain air cool, but her skin burning with effort. Gripping the release lever, she braced against the boulder, her boots digging into the earth. The trap fought back, its spring groaning like a living thing. Her first pull barely budged it, the jaws mocking her strength. She cursed under her breath, a habit picked up from trail drivers, and tried again, muscles straining until her arms screamed. The warrior watched, his gaze glassy but alert, tracking her every move. He murmured a single word in Comanche, low and resonant, its meaning clear. Try. Hannah nodded, her resolve hardening like iron in a forge. She adjusted her grip, planting her feet wider, and threw her weight into it. The trap's jaws creaked, then parted an inch, then 2. Blood surged from the wound as pressure eased, and Hannah's heart lurched. Too much bleeding could kill him faster than the trap. With a final heave, she forced the jaws wide enough, yanking his leg free. The trap snapped shut with a bone-jarring clang, empty now, its teeth gleaming red in the sunlight. She didn't pause to catch her breath. Kneeling again, she poured whiskey from her flask over the mangled ankle, the warrior hissing through clenched teeth. The wound was a mess, torn flesh, fractured bone, but the major artery, by some miracle, held intact. Hannah tore strips from her petticoat bandages, working with the precision her father drilled into her. Each wrap was tight, deliberate, staunching the flow as flies buzzed greedily nearby. The warrior's chant resumed, softer now, a lifeline to his spirit, as much as her hands were to his body. As she tied off the last bandage, his hand moved, slow but purposeful, to a pouch at his belt. He drew out a carved eagle-bone pendant, its edges worn smooth by years of touch. He pressed it into her palm, his fingers warm despite his pallor, and spoke again in Comanche, his voice steady despite the laudanum's haze. Hannah didn't need words to understand. This was no mere trinket. It was a vow, a debt etched in bone, binding them across the chasm of their worlds. The moment hung fragile, like a spider's thread in the wind, until Copper's sharp whinny snapped her back. Hoofbeats echoed faintly from the canyon's rim, distant, but closing fast. Bounty hunters, or Morrison's cavalry. She didn't know which, but either spelled death for a Comanche chief and the woman who'd saved him. Hannah's eyes darted to the warrior, now struggling to sit, his pride refusing to let him lie helpless. "We need to move," she whispered, urgency sharpening her voice. "If this story's pulling you in, folks, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're listening from. It keeps us spinning these tales for you." The canyon wasn't done with them yet, and neither was fate. Hannah scanned the ravine for cover, spotting a narrow cave mouth half hidden by scrub. She slung the satchel over her shoulder, supporting the warrior as he leaned on her, his weight heavy, but his steps defiant. Each shuffle kicked up dust, leaving a trail no tracker could miss. The hoofbeats grew louder, a drumbeat of doom, and Hannah knew their time was measured in heartbeats. The cave was their only chance, a gamble against the hunters, and the prophecy this land seemed hell-bent on writing. The cave mouth swallowed Hannah and the warrior like a beast gulping down prey, its damp shadows a fleeting shield from the hoofbeats, thundering closer in Devil's Canyon. Hannah's arm burned under the Comanche's weight, his injured leg dragging as they stumbled into the dark. The air inside was thick, smelling of wet stone and secrets older than the mountains themselves. Her boot slipped on slick rock, but she held firm, guiding him to a ledge where they could catch their breath. Outside, the canyon pulsed with danger. Bounty hunters or cavalry, it didn't matter. Either way, the blood trail they'd left was a map leading death straight to them. Hannah set the warrior down, his face pale but his eyes still sharp, scanning the cave like a hawk. She rummaged through her satchel, pulling out her tinderbox to spark a small flame. The fire's glow revealed walls carved with ancient pictographs, spiraling symbols, warriors on horseback, and a woman with light hair tending a wounded man. Hannah's breath caught. The images weren't just art. They told a story, one that felt like it was written for this moment. The warrior, Tahu, she now knew from his murmured introduction, traced a symbol with a trembling finger. "The cave spirits spoke of you," he said, his voice rough but clear in broken English. "A woman of light hair, saving a chief from steel. 3 winters old, this prophecy." The words hit like a rifle shot. Hannah, a woman of science, trained by her doctor father, had no use for omens. Yet the carvings were too precise. Her hair, the trap, even the storm gathering outside. She shook off the chill creeping up her spine and checked Tahu's bandages. The bleeding had slowed, but his skin burned with the first signs of fever. She needed to clean the wound again, but the distant clatter of hooves reminded her time was a luxury they didn't have. The cave's wall seemed to pulse with the prophecy's weight, as if the mountain itself was watching. A low rumble outside signaled the storm's arrival, rain hissing against the canyon walls. Hannah's mind raced. The cave was a temporary haven, but the blood trail would lead their pursuers right to it. She pulled out a vial of carbolic acid from her satchel, its sharp scent a weapon as much as medicine. Moving to the cave's entrance, she soaked strips of bandage and scattered them among the rocks upwind. The chemical stench would mimic disease, cholera, maybe, enough to spook even hardened killers. She crouched low, listening as the hoofbeats slowed, replaced by rough voices. "Blood's fresh," one growled, his tone hard as flint. Someone sprung the trap. Took skill, too. Hannah peered through a crack in the rock. 3 men, bounty hunters by their weathered gear and cold eyes, stood at the ravine's edge, scanning the blood trail. The leader, Garrett, spat into the dust. "Could be that Comanche war party we've tracked. They're clever enough to save their own." His companion, younger, shifted impatiently. "We're wasting daylight, Garrett. That brave's worth 50 in gold." Hannah's stomach twisted. $50 for Tahu's scalp, a price set by Colonel Morrison, her late husband's brother, whose hatred for the Comanche burned hotter than a prairie fire. Tahu stirred behind her, his fevered eyes meeting hers. "If I die," he whispered, his voice steady despite the pain, "give me to my people. If I live, my debt is yours. My heart, my tribe." The vow landed heavy, a promise forged in blood and honor. Hannah nodded, her throat tight. She couldn't let him die, not after defying death to free him. The hunters' voices grew sharper, their boots crunching closer. Then the carbolic acid stench hit them. "Son of a bitch," Garrett cursed, his voice thick with fear. "Smells like fever, cholera maybe. Let's clear out before we catch it." The hunters scrambled back, their retreat a chaotic clatter of spurs and curses. Hannah exhaled, relief fleeting. The ruse had bought them time, but the storm was turning the canyon into a death trap. Flash floods could drown them if they stayed, and Tahu's fever was climbing. She scanned the cave for another exit, her firelight catching more pictographs, a map maybe, etched by hands long dead. Tahu followed her gaze, his knowledge of the land deeper than hers. "There," he pointed, indicating a narrow fissure at the cave's back. "The mountain breathes there. A path." Hannah helped him stand, his weight heavy on her shoulder. The fissure was tight, barely wide enough for one. She grabbed a burning branch for light, its flame flickering in the damp air. The prophecy's weight clung to her like dust, urging her forward. Whatever this cave foretold, it wasn't done with them yet. They slipped into the passage, the mountain closing around them as the storm's roar faded and the hunters' echoes grew distant. The mountain's dark passage spat Hannah and Tahu onto a high ledge, the storm's roar now a distant growl as Devil's Canyon opened below them, like a wound in the earth. Rain lashed the Colorado cliffs in 1879, turning the red rock slick and treacherous. Hannah steadied Tahu, his fever-hot skin burning against her arm, his ankle swollen under her makeshift bandages. The flickering torch cast jagged shadows, but the fresh air pouring from the tunnel's end promised escape, if they could survive the climb. Below, the canyon churned with menace. Colonel Morrison's cavalry, bounty hunters, and a Comanche war party were converging, their paths drawn by blood and prophecy. Hannah's eyes swept the landscape, rain stinging her face. The ledge offered no cover, just a sheer drop to the ravine where Tahu's blood trail still beckoned their enemies. She tightened her grip on him, his weight a reminder of the vow binding them. "We can't stay," she said, her voice sharp as a spur. Tahu nodded, his jaw clenched, leaning on a makeshift crutch she'd fashioned from a branch. His warrior's pride fought the fever, but each step was a battle against collapse. They moved toward a faint outline in the cliff face, a cave, maybe, or another tunnel, guided by the pictograph's promise of a path to safety. The storm's fury masked their movements, but not the distant clatter of hooves. Hannah's heart thudded as she spotted blue uniforms glinting through the downpour. Colonel Morrison's men, led by her brother-in-law, whose hatred for the Comanche was a fire that never dimmed. From the west, a war cry split the air, raw and primal, announcing Chief Iron Wolf, Tahu's father, with 40 warriors at his back. Their painted faces and eagle feathers flashed like lightning against the cliffs. Between them, the bounty hunters prowled, their rifles gleaming with greed for the $50 scalp. Hannah and Tahu reached the new cave, its mouth wide enough to swallow them whole. Inside, fire-blackened stones and scattered bones hinted at ancient travelers, but the air was dry, the walls marked with more pictographs. These showed a battle, horses rearing, warriors clashing, and a woman standing firm amid chaos. Hannah's skin prickled. The prophecy was unfolding, and she was its heart. She helped Tahu settle against the wall, checking his wound. The swelling had worsened, but his herb pouch yielded a bitter paste that eased the inflammation when smeared on the torn flesh. His eyes, though glassy, burned with purpose. "My father comes," he said. "He will not let them take us." The cave shook as gunfire erupted outside, the sharp crack of cavalry carbines, answered by the deeper boom of Comanche rifles. Hannah peered through the entrance, rain blurring her view. Morrison's men charged up the eastern canyon, sabers drawn, while Iron Wolf's warriors melted into the rocks, their arrows and bullets finding targets with deadly precision. The bounty hunters, caught in the crossfire, fired wildly, their leader Garrett shouting orders lost in the storm's howl. The canyon had become a killing ground, a triangle of death where no side would yield. Hannah's satchel was nearly empty, but she found a scalpel, its blade a sliver of hope. She cut strips from her coat to reinforce Tahu's bandages, her hand steady despite the chaos. He watched her, his silence heavier than words, then pulled a small clay pot from his pouch. War paint, sacred and fierce. With trembling fingers, he smeared red and black across his face, transforming from wounded chief to a force of vengeance. The act was a defiance of death, a call to his ancestors. Hannah felt the air shift, as if the cave's spirits approved. A sudden lull in the gunfire snapped her focus. Morrison's voice carried through the rain, cold and commanding. "Spread out. They're in these caves." His soldiers fanned across the canyon, their lanterns flickering like will-o-wisps. Hannah's ruse with the carbolic acid wouldn't fool them twice. She and Tahu had minutes before discovery. He struggled to his feet, leaning on the crutch, his war paint glowing in the torchlight. "I will face them," he said, his voice a low growl. "You run." "No," Hannah snapped, her frontier grit flaring. "We fight together, or not at all." She grabbed the torch, searching the cave's depths for another exit. The pictographs hinted at a tunnel network, a maze carved by Comanche hands centuries ago. Tahu's knowledge guided her, his finger tracing a spiral on the wall. "This way," he said, pointing to a crack barely wide enough for a child. They squeezed through, the stones scraping their skin, the torch's flames sputtering in the tight passage. As they crawled, the battle outside escalated. A Comanche war cry echoed, answered by Morrison's shouted orders and the hunters' panicked shots. The tunnel widened, leading to a hidden valley where a crystal stream gleamed under storm clouds. Grazing there were horses, chief running bears lost herd, their coats shining like polished obsidian. Tahu's breath caught. "The sacred herd," he whispered, reverence in his voice. "Hidden from the bluecoats." The valley was a sanctuary, but the battle's din followed them, promising no refuge. Hannah and Tahu stood at the edge, bound by a prophecy that demanded they face the storm together. Hannah and Tahu's journey through Devil's Canyon wove a tapestry of courage, defying a world torn by hate. Their story, born in blood and sealed by a vow, challenges us to find bridges where only walls once stood. What did their tale stir in you? Share your thoughts below. Where are you listening from, and what moved you most? Your voices keep these stories alive. I'm grateful for your time, riding alongside us through this frontier saga. Until we meet again in the next tale, keep the fire of hope burning. Stay tuned for more stories that carve new paths through the wild.